Good evening and welcome to the final GP14 Association talk for the Female Festival of Sailing by World Sailing. Tonight we are talking about the roles that support sailing, and we have some very well qualified people here to talk. So if I ask them to give a brief introduction of themselves and then we just briefly how they got to where they are, and then we will ask some questions. So can I start with Olive, please?
Hi, everybody.
So carry on.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Olive Parker. I suppose I started my journey as a sailor. I was, as a child, an Optimus sailor. Then I went straight from Optimus into GP14s. I met my husband through GP14s, and we traveled the world sailing in many of the World Championships events. They were short measures in GP14s, so I said I would become a measurer for the GP14 class in Ireland, and which I did alongside of sailing. Then I married my husband after the World Championships in Skerries many years ago, and I then had children, and they got involved in the Optimus class. So as a measurer in the GP14 class, I was asked if I would like to become a measurer in the Optimus class. And I thought, well, if I can measure 3 sails in a GP14, I'll have no problem measuring sails for an Optimist. And little did I know that the measurement was a lot more complicated in the Optimist, isn't that right, Sally? than what the GP14 3 sails were. So my friend Curly Morris told me, yeah, you can do this, Olive, if you can do the GP14s. So I naively got involved in the measurement of the Optimus class. So here I am now. My children sailed internationally, so I got involved in measurement from that. And I am now currently chair of the technical committee of the Optimist International Dinghy Association. And I'm currently now in Mexico as we speak, measuring at the North American Championships. So yeah, that's how I got involved. So you get sucked in very easily. So.
Thank you very much for joining us from Mexico, Olive. Sally, would you like to introduce yourself and explain how you got to where you are now?
Okay. Unlike probably everybody else on this call, I didn't start sailing until I was nearly 30. And that was windsurfing. And I started competing, and that got me into sailing nationally and internationally, and I absolutely loved it. But I found there was a general feeling that windsurfers didn't know the rules. So I decided that I really wanted to learn more about that side. And it was actually a GP14 dinghy sailor who taught me the rules. And from that, I got interested in judging and started with the RYA as a judge and an umpire nationally. And then gradually moved into more international events. So I've now been an international umpire and international judge for more than 25 years, I think. And that's brought me to travel all over the world, and I've absolutely loved it. So although I no longer compete in sailing, I'm still very active in terms of the officiating side, and run that alongside my chosen career, which is one as a sculptor and maker. So the two seem to be worlds apart, but actually they do come together at times, and it actually provides a really nice balance for me. But now I suppose I'm beginning to get towards the end of my officiating career, so I'm working with the RYA as a mentor on their Race Officials Academy, which I started this year. And despite lockdown, we've had quite a few Zoom meetings, and that side I'm really enjoying. So I'm hoping to do a bit more of that in the future.
Thank you. It's interesting to see the RYA is mentoring race officials.
Yeah, and particularly young ones. I think the age is, I think it goes
under 30.
Yeah, 18 to 35. So
And they, yeah.
it's for 6 years. So it isn't a case of just sort of a short 1 year. It's actually 6 years, and they'll look after you and take you through to national level. And then if you want to go to international level, they'll help you and assist you to that. And it isn't just in one discipline. So in the first year, everybody's expected to have a go at all the different disciplines before then deciding on what the specialty is. So I think it's actually a really good way of trying to get younger people, and particularly it's very much focused on gender equality, which I think is a really important thing here, because certainly when I started officiating, and still it's the case, women are a minority, but also young people. There are more young people now coming into the sport as officials, but still the average age is over 50. And when I first started, the average age was over 60. So yeah, there's a lot of potential as officials for younger people, and lots of opportunities.
Brilliant. We will return to that. Carrie Ann, would you like to introduce yourself and explain quite how you got to where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Carrie Boylan. I am from beautiful Skerries. I grew up sailing here. My family were all big sailors. My granddad was a boat builder, and he built boats and actually ran a sailing school just from the harbour here. My dad is a sailor. Yeah, I got started in offies really young. Grew out of offies quite quick. I shot up, was very tall, and went straight into a mare and a mare dinghy, and competed at a really high level in the mare. Did a lot of world and European championships, and was top girl in Ireland for a good few years. I raced them with any little kid I could get my hands on. So I had opti kids, and I would sort of mentor them through, and I really enjoyed that, and I loved that aspect of it. Sort of teaching them what they could possibly grow up to be, sailing wise and competing wise. Then I went off, became an instructor, a coach, and I got to travel around the world with that also. So I've coached in America for 5 summers over in the States, coaching the opti race team. I've also coached in Ireland all over, coaching the racing over here, and yeah, Malta for a summer as well, so for seasons. And it's something that I'm very passionate about, but I also get a lot of sailing in myself, so I love that also. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Brilliant, thank you, Carrie Ann.
Yeah.
Ella, would you like to introduce yourself and say how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, so I'm Ella Stoggle. I've been in a boat since I was basically born. I started sailing offies, and I got my first offie when I was 3 years old, so I wasn't very big. I sailed them for quite a few years because I never grew out of them. I'm still the same height as when I actually came out of offies. Then I went on to 420s, 470s, and then loads of other different boats in between. And from a young age, I was always on the water with my dad, doing events and things. So I was always exposed to the race officiating side of it that way. As I've got older, I've got more interested in it, and it's been quite nice to see the other side of it from different to racing. So I've done that for a good few years now, and yeah, I got my national race officer qualification, and I'm also part of the Project 24, which Sally was talking about. So I was part of the first intake on that. It's a great scheme, and yeah, it's a great opportunity to actually meet other young officials, and we are literally like a little group of team, and everyone communicates like weekly to see each other. So yeah, that's a little bit of me.
Brilliant, thank you, Ella. Jill, should we come down from that level and talk about what you've done at club level and for the GP14 Association?
I'm going to say I've never risen to such dizzy heights as our 4 speakers. Yes, well, I too was a late starter to sailing. I didn't start until I was 40, and I had no sailing experience up to then. I learned to sail at my home club, which is South Sailing Club, And my husband also started to sail within that first year. And fortunately, the club offered a huge amount of support and information. And not only that, we had one of our sons became quite a good sailor quite quickly. And so after sailing on a Sunday, there would be a post-mortem as to what we should have done or what we didn't do. Within a year of joining the club, I offered to do social secretary, which I did for 2 years. And I do feel that that was a really good opportunity to get to know people, because when you join the sailing club and you have no experience, then everybody seems to know everything and you know nothing. But I found doing this social role, it gave me an opportunity to talk to people, and so it was really good. And it was a post that I revisited several times after that. One of the other things was I was the only woman, and still am the only woman, to sit on a sailing committee as a fleet captain. Nobody else. There have been 2 other women on the sailing committee, one as secretary and one very recently as female representative, but no other woman has ever sat on the sailing committee as a fleet captain, which I find quite interesting. And then in 2019, I became the 2nd female Commodore in the club in the 50-year history. So that was a really good year. And the following, in the history of the club, which is nearly 70 years old, there have only been 4 female Commodores. The Commodoreship lasts for 1 year in our club. And in fact, in most cases, there's been a 10-year gap in between each of the lady Commodores, and we joke that it takes them that long to get over having us for a year as a Commodore. So that's as far as the club is concerned. I've also sat on the house committee for 10 years. On a slightly higher level, GP level, I was asked in 2010 if I would take on championship chairman, which took me a little while to decide I would, but I'm really pleased I did. And so I was championship chairman for 8 years. So organised 3 world championships and had a cameo role in the World Championship in Ireland. During that period, I co-opted I had 3 different teams over that 8-year period. And so I co-opted quite a lot of people onto those teams. And I think, well, the association benefited from having lots of different ideas. But again, I think that there were quite a few people who had quite specific skills, also became happier within the association because it gave them the opportunity to make friends more easily. And so I think that was a significant part really of being in that role. So I think that's about where I am now. I handed over to Vanessa. She's now championship chairman, and now I organise the training for the GP Association. So that's my history.
I think we've lost Vanessa. So
we've lost Vanessa. Oh, we have lost Vanessa. Where have you gone, Vanessa? Okay, so well, I'll carry on with some questions then. So, ladies, it's really nice to see you all. So, going on to Sally, one of the questions that Vanessa and I were talking about was, what is the difference? Can you explain to us the difference between a judge, an umpire, and being on a jury? Because I think a lot of sailors find that intriguing and don't necessarily understand.
Okay, the standard distinction, I suppose, is an umpire normally will make field of play decisions, so on Part 2 rules. So whereas a judge normally will only make field of play decisions where Rule 42 is concerned. So the dreaded yellow flag comes out. But for umpires, it's very specific set of rules for match racing, team racing, fleet racing. All now have a set of rules whereby umpires give immediate decisions on the water. So it means it saves time. So afterwards, there are fewer hearings. In most cases, there are no hearings at all. So the aim is to actually resolve any incidents on the course at the time. And also I think umpires tend to have a closer relationship with the sailors in many ways, because there tends to be, instead of evening time spent in hearings, it's evening time spent at the bar maybe and talking about calls on the water. And it's really an education, both, and it goes both ways, because we will learn from the sailors what they saw from their perspective and vice versa. So judges, yes, they do go on the water, but their training is not specific normally for the field of play decision side of it. But there are fewer differences now between the roles, especially as at Olympic level with medal racing. Medal racing is done by both umpires and judges, but the training of an umpire is very much geared towards those field of play decisions. So, but both umpires and judges can be on a jury or form a jury. So most of the time sailors will just meet the jury at resolving any protests that they may make after racing. But actually a lot of the jury work happens before an event, going through the sailing instructions, the notice of race, and making sure all of that side works. So from my own personal point of view, I prefer umpiring because it's much more interactive and there's a lot more going on. I find it much more interesting, and there's a lot more interaction with the rules and a lot more interaction with the sailors. So that is my preferred choice, but I think I answered that.
So Olive, you obviously as a measurer must have quite a lot of interaction with your sailors, and well, with obviously if you're oppies with parents as well, presumably.
The dreaded parents. Yeah, I always feel that we're probably luckier, or we're probably the luckiest people involved in sailing, in that we get to meet every single sailor.
Yes.
And every single sailor at every event gets to know us, and we're the guys that are walking around the yard, we're checking the boats. The likes of umpires, the kids don't see them unless they're on the water usually. But yeah, I feel, I mean, every sailor knows me from talking to them, and I feel I'm a problem solver, because right now we have a break in our measurement, and we've got people trying to sort out sails that aren't complying to the class rules. So we have to do a lot of talking with coaches and explain what is wrong with their sails, or what they have to do to correct them to enable the kids to go sailing. Parents, we try to keep them away because they think their little kid is the best kid in the water and cause more problems. And it actually just stresses everything out. So what we try to deal with is the team coach and the kids directly.
Yes.
And then it runs really smoothly. And we're teaching role as well. Like we're usually the first class that any of these kids have gone to any kind of international event.
Yeah.
So they understand class rules. Some of them have never heard about their class rules. Some of them just get into their boat and sail. So we have to teach them as well in a fair way, and explain to them as clearly as we possibly can what they can or cannot do on the water with regards to the class rules and the setting up of their boat, and try to get them to relax coming into measurement, because if they get a bad experience going through measurement as an optimal sailor, and they go to a 420 event or any other event, a GP14 event, they will be extremely nervous going to.
Yeah.
I feel that we have to treat the child with greatest respect, and that it's our job to help them get on the water, and so that it's any issues should be dealt with the coach and not with the kid, and it shouldn't be a stressful situation for them. So no, I actually love it. We're also extremely lucky because we're also on the finish line at the race on the water, and we usually talk to 3 or 4 kids in the top 10 have to come alongside us, and we have to check to make sure their boat is compliant, their sails, equipment. And yeah, we're the first people to congratulate the winner of an event. So I'm the first person to do that's crying over the finish line. You know, so yeah, I do feel that we're in a very honorable position. You know, I'm very grateful that I got involved in the technical aspect of sailing. Yeah, the kids come, and so they don't go to their coach, they have to come to us first, so we're the first ones to congratulate them. So so yeah, I love that. So yeah, it's good fun. It really is good fun. So yeah.
So Carrie Ann, you obviously coach oppie sailors, so do you also like to keep the parents at a reasonable distance and just deal with the children, with the kids, or do you find
sometimes it's tough now, sometimes but at the end of the day, the kids can't do it without the parents. I find more educating the parents beforehand on nearly the do's and don'ts is a better way of doing it, rather than it coming to an issue, as we say. So I always sort of call in any of the parents and just have a chat with them. Look, I'm running this, you know, it's great to have your help, but you have to let me do what I do best, basically. And it helps, and they understand then, like they do get it. They want little Johnny to do well, but yeah, they have to, you know, give him a bit of space to do well. Pushing too much isn't the best, and it really does. Like, I've seen so many sailors that I grew up with that never hopped in a boat after optimists sometimes. And the aim of the game is to keep them sailing, and keep them sailing for life. So that's what sometimes the parents can help with that, and sometimes they can be a bit tough with that. But my aim is to educate the parents as well as the kids. So yeah,
I must admit, we have quite a good kids junior coaching on a Sunday, but I've found over the years that we belong to the club that the kids that come through the system and sail, you know, into their teens, they are very rounded children. I think they because, and we see them as equals. And they talk to us as if we're equals as well, which I think is really nice.
Yeah, I honestly think sailing gives you all the attributes to be an all-round good person. Anything that I have like progressed in life, I've realized that it all stems back to sailing and what I learned. A lot of what I learned on a race course. You know, how to deal with problems when they arise, anticipate the problems, you know, all these things, and you know, deal with stress. You know, we've all been in stressful situations out in the middle of a race, and it's just, big time. There is a big correlation with that, and they're very well rounded when you keep them going through the tough times.
And do you find there's an equal number of girls and boys, or does it more or less?
Yeah, in the beginning, yes, but they do fade off. There's a weird thing on. Girls can be quite soft while out racing, and there's a lot of aggression on the race course sometimes. And I find that sometimes girls get a little bit scared off, and they don't like that side of it. Some people don't like the oppie side of it. The one man sailing boats sometimes isn't for everyone. That's why I love to steer after an oppie, sort of steer them into the double-handed section where maybe they don't want to helm and be that, you know, boisterous person at the tiller. But yeah, I do see a lot of drop off in girls. They get they nearly get pushed out of it sometimes.
There've been in both the Helms and the Cruise Talk this week, there was obviously the subject of aggression on the water from the males, but in fact I think probably the end conclusion was that knowledge is power, and so the more you know about your rules, etc., then
no one can push.
The more powerful you feel, and less vulnerable, really.
Yeah, and I'd have a chat. I'd pull, like, after a race, you know, I have some of the kids beside me, and I have a chat with them, and I'm like, okay, this person, they actually shout. Sometimes kids are they're clever enough to shout stuff that isn't quite right, but because they shout the loudest, they get away with it. And you know, that's exactly, knowledge is power. So I will just say, right, so they shouted something wrong, you learn from that mistake and think, hey, right, I'm going to know this rule next time, so that when they shout at me, I go, no, that's not right, would you stop that, you know? And that's how I approach racing as well. Like, I don't shout back, I go, no, that's completely wrong, no, I'm totally in the right here. And that's probably the best way to deal with it. But yeah, no, big time, knowledge is power. Totally agree with that. Yeah.
Vanessa, did you want to ask any questions, or shall I go on? I was just going to ask Ella about, I was reading through her CV and it said you're looking to identify the barriers for women in sailing, both recreationally and officiating. What barriers have you identified, and do you see that changing?
Some of the barriers that were identified were like when a woman has a child and then they don't go back into sailing after it, or like Carrie was saying about the aggressive side of things. Some people just really don't like that and don't like it on the water. Even some people we found just like the recreational side of sailing, and they're not so interested in the racing side of it. So some clubs have been putting on like just recreational sailing where they just go out on the water and have fun and then have tea and cake after.
Yeah, I can agree with that, Ella. I'm not competitive at all, but I quite like, you know, enabling others to be competitive. So yeah, definitely the aggression side and the competition side is not for everybody.
Yeah, and then also keeping young women in the sport. As Carrie says, they drop out. So many people who I grew up with throughout sailing, so many of them don't sail anymore. Luckily, some of them have actually come back into Project 24 to be officials.
Yeah, I think sometimes the girls find being on the water for 5 hours at a time difficult to cope with as young females. The boys that I've seen are very happy to jump in the water or sail off and do whatever they need to do, but I think the girls just find that isn't how girls behave. So yeah, there are a number of discussions we've definitely had around, you know, the table when you're out on the water, you're away from land for so long. So yes, definitely girls, and they do come back. We are seeing, you know, at the club we see the families go away when they get children, but when the children are a certain age, they come back. I apologise, I lost complete and utter internet. So everybody managed to get in apart from me. So it is difficult, but it is a sport you can do with your children and race with and against every member of your family. Last weekend's event, we had a father in one boat, we had a mother and daughter, the mother and daughter in another boat, you know, the wife and daughter, and usually they then have their second child helming a third boat at an event. I have been at an event where I've been responsible for getting 4 boats on the water. You know, husband, daughter, son's girlfriend. And it does get that the mothers sometimes take a step back, I think, and put the other sailors first. Sometimes they get that. So Jill, sorry, carry on. You seem to be, I'm not sure which questions have been asked and which ones haven't while I was trying to get back in. Jill, you need to unmute yourself. Jill, you're still muted.
So my internet is also a bit unstable at the moment, but hopefully I'll be all right. So one of the other questions that we thought was, do you think it's necessary, some of you, to continue sailing, to remain current in your role, or do you feel that's not necessary? Olive, what do you feel about that? You still sail, don't you?
I do. I sail. I do a little bit of coaching. Yeah, well, I do because I love it, and I do my job in the technical side because I love it. And I always think, God, am I totally crazy that I travel around the world for other people's children? But no, I do love it. I do love the people I meet. Sailing, I think, is important to sail. One, for your own mental health, which is huge. Because going out in the water, if people have never experienced sailing, I think once you leave the shore, you actually leave everything behind in the shore. So for me, that's hugely important. Secondly, it also makes me think about the sail, the shape of the sail, you know, what you can do to improve the sail, the boat. I've plenty of stories of sailing in GP and spending many and then I ended up sailing with a female crew because as I was getting older, I was more embarrassed to do the essential jobs that you have to do in between racing. With the crew, when there was no toilet boat on the water. And I always felt sorry for the person who had to buy my GP14 after me. I do think it's important to continue sailing, but there's lots of jobs that you can do that doesn't involve sailing. My job, for sure, you can do it by not going on the water at all. It's it's measurement. You know the rules, slightly different to Sally's, where I think it's more important to have a better understanding as to how you can move the boat. But my job is a tape measure, a micrometer, a rule book, and an understanding of how a sail works. And I'm here in Mexico, and I have a team of 17 measurers or volunteers with me, of which I would think probably, I'm looking around the room, I think I have 4 sailors here. So to do my job, you don't need to sail. So you can get involved in the technical side of sailing without being a sailor or without even setting foot on the water. So.
I certainly found just getting people involved when I was doing championships. I found that it was really good to get the non-sailing, because the GP class tends to be very much a family class, and I found it really quite good to get the non-sailing members to come to ask them to do small jobs, and they really like doing that. So perhaps registration or helping with the social event, but it just makes them feel part of the event, really, where they're left all day. Well, the other part of the family goes out sailing, and I do think it's nice to get involved in that way.
Yeah, well, I can speak on behalf of my own club, more from a parent side. We have a lot of children, and especially now with COVID, because parents are realizing that you're probably the safest place on the water than you are anywhere else in the world. So we've a huge increase of brand new members of kids starting to sail in our program in my local club. And as a result, there's a lot of parents are coming down that have never, ever set foot in a sailing. And they threw their kids in for a week of sailing, and the kids are now addicted to it, and they realize how safe it is on the water. So we have a whole bunch of parents that, the social side of it is now we're now giving them jobs like make coffee, hot chocolate for the kids, maybe do a rib course. You don't have to sail to do a rib course, and you might get involved in mark laying. And it's phenomenal. I mean, 4 weeks ago, we had 6 members of our junior committee, and we have now got 16 on our junior committee. Of those 10 new members, not one of them are sailors, and have never set foot in a boat, and are going to get involved in preparing the boats and how, making sure the equipment is there. There's people that are now going to do a little bit on ribs and how to keep the motor engines working, because there's a mechanic involved, and he's never sailed, but he's now interested in looking at the engines. We've got a lot of organization, so there's a lot, like we need a treasurer that doesn't have to be a sailor, a PR officer doesn't have to be a sailor. So there's so much you can get involved in your local club by not being a sailor, and you're part of an environment that you might as well be a sailor. So it's really, really good.
Sally, you said you didn't sail any longer. Is that right?
I don't sail competitively anymore, but certainly initially, when you start out as an official, as a judge or an umpire, I believe you do need to have sailed. You need to understand how a particular boat moves. If you're going to have a hearing, when you get evidence from a sailor and they say how they reacted in a particular incident, you need to understand what a boat is capable of doing. So even if I haven't personally sailed a boat in that class, I'll make sure that when I'm out on the water, you get an understanding of how it can maneuver. And with match racing in particular, a lot of it is about where you position your boat. So that means you need a tactical awareness. So you need to be able to predict what's the most likely thing to happen next in order to be able to be in the right place at the right time, not just to see the incident, but also not to get in the way of the sailors. Because as Olive said, she has a great role on the finish line and sees the joy with the sailors when they've actually won a race. For us, we always say we have the best seat in the house because we are so close to the sailors that, yeah, it is, you do feel very honored to be there. And I think for me, I know I raced internationally, but now I'm able to officiate at a much higher level. So I think that's a huge honor to be able to do that. But I think it really opens your eyes to the dedication that goes in for all these amazing sailors that are competing at worlds and Olympic level. And for them to try and balance their life, I think, is much harder than it is for us as officials. But if you're going to work at a high level, then you owe it to the sailors to put in as many hours as you possibly can to be as good as you can within that discipline in order to be able to really provide them with a service. And I think for women that's particularly difficult because they have so many pulls on their time. And if you are wanting to work at that high level, there isn't a lot of time for family. And I think that is why fewer than 20% of the top race officials are women. I mean, it is increasing. It was in single figures when I first started, but actually women make some of the best officials. I think they can be much more sensitive and much more compassionate. And the dynamic of a mixed gender jury is very different sometimes to that of an all male jury or even an all female jury, come to that. So I think it is really important that we try and get as many women involved as we can. And it is just as important to have women within these roles at club level where it's less of a drain on time or less of a pull on time as it is at international level. So I really enjoy what I do and I feel very lucky to be able to do it. So I think if through things like this you can encourage more women to feel confident enough to give it a go, because I think a lot of it is confidence. I think things are changing and it is an easier role for women than it used to be, but it is still difficult. But some of the best judges and umpires in the world are women. Sure. Women do make excellent officials and coaches, and I think that's very much recognized, but we are in the minority and it still is difficult to get anywhere, be it at club, national or international level.
Ella, how do you find that your role impacts on your life generally? It's a full-time, obviously full-time job for you, is it?
It's not, no. I do have a full-time job outside of doing all the officiating. But officiating actually got me my job. I was sat on a committee boat in the middle of Weymouth Harbour and the boss of the company said, what do you want to do after uni? And I got an interview. So even just being an official has actually like grown my career outside of sailing. So that's an interesting one. But just being on the water and being an official has helped me as a sailor as well. Because sometimes I feel like being on the committee boat, I see a lot more and see a lot more happening than I do in a boat, which is quite a strange thing. So yeah, I can predict what's going to happen. I can look at what the boats are doing, and definitely being able to understand the boats, as Sally says, really does help as an official. And even just being able to just jump into a different class of boat and sail it it's always quite nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like at our club, we did a club laser radial event. We had 30 lasers on the water, and a lot of them were females and mums and kids, and everyone just joined and went sailing. So it was great to see.
Carrie Ann, is it full-time job for you?
Not quite. In the summer, yeah, big time. Yeah, I take it on full time. But in university, I was sailing captain of my university team. So I sort of had the coaching. I would put my training for this university team in line with all the coaching I was doing for the local kids as well. So it was sort of like coincided. But yeah, I take any and every opportunity to get out in the water and race myself, because you know, I'm constantly learning, as Ella just said, from the kids themselves out in the water, the kids, adults, whoever I'm coaching. When I see them doing something wrong in a race, I learn from that, and they learn from that. Or vice versa, they're doing something right in the race. It's great to see. It's always a happy moment when they're first around the windward, and you're like, oh, this is amazing. But yeah, no, and I do a lot of racing myself. I have a really big thing about trying to get as much of my friends that are girls into sailing. I've actually I'm doing up a J24 at the moment and trying to get that out racing, and then hopefully a GP for the Worlds here in my local sailing club. And I want to have a female crew, and I want females to constantly be sailing and really push to get them involved. There's so many amazing sailors that just sort of drop off, and I found that in university sailing, a lot of the really good helms when we were growing up that would win the races against the boys, they went to university and they decided to crew, and their helm was no way as good as them. And I just thought, what he is doing? And I just had it in my head. I was like, I am helming the whole entire time. I don't care. I was just like, I want to be out there steering the boat as much as anyone else. So yeah, I've definitely, it big time coincides with coaching and my own sailing.
Yeah. Vanessa, are you?
Yeah, I think we covered everything, have we, Jill? That we
think so, yes.
mentioned.
Yeah.
Is there anything, ladies, that we've missed? Because I certainly don't race. I missed, introducing how I got into sailing. I grew up with a family business in Cowes High Street. Never got to go sailing. So at about 17, joined the Sea Scouts to learn to sail. My husband also grew up on the Isle of Wight, and his family sailed. So once we had children and stopped doing the individual and slightly dangerous sports, we decided that sailing was something we could do as a family. I did race occasionally, but as the kids got bigger, the conditions got stronger for me to have to be in the boat until I kind of said, I'm not going out in that. And then obviously started taking the kids around events. My husband volunteered me to help out at events to get to know people. Jill invited me to help out at registration. I had a small role as looking after trophies for the 420s for about 3 years, and ended up on the GP14 championship committee, and all the other committee members melted away and left me holding the boat, I suppose to say. So that's how I got to be where I am. And the funny thing is the kids now tell me off for talking sailing at the table rather than me telling them off. So it is a bit strange when I contact them to ask them technical questions on sailing, especially the bits I don't understand. So but anyway, thank you all very much for your time. Is there anybody who's listening that has a question that they'd like to put forward to anybody?
Hi Vanessa, it's Katie.
Hiya, Katie.
Hi, how are you? Sorry, I'm on the phone now, so I don't even know. I'll turn on the video in the kitchen just after having my dinner. But actually, that was really, really fascinating. I just want to thank you all, first of all. And it's often said at events, you know, they thank people who've put the event together, but it's probably made me realize, especially for an event the size and caliber of a Worlds, like the organization that goes on behind it, from the likes of Jill and Vanessa, and then the umpiring, the measuring, like that. The event doesn't happen without all of that. And I think people don't appreciate that enough, is the first thing I'd say. So thank you to all of you who are involved in that. I did have a question, and apologies because I missed the very start on your intros, but I actually crewed. I sailed for a long time. I crewed for a lot of time in my 20s. I stopped sailing for a little while, had young children, and I actually came back to it as a helm after having the young children. And one thing that I would think I'm weak on are the rules. And it's one thing sitting down reading a rule book, but I'm just wondering what you ladies might think is the best way for a sailor to get more up to speed with the rules and the rules in practice, as opposed to the rules in a page on a book. Because yeah, we do a lot of our boat handling training and our speed and all that stuff. We don't really train for incidences on the race course where rules are going to, be very, very important. So that was my question. Thank you.
Who would you like to answer that one, Katie? We're going to ask Sally, Ella.
I'm thinking Sally to start anyway, and if anyone else has any advice, because it's just trying to bring the theory into real life, and especially if you're having to make decisions on the spur of a moment.
So let me just say that Katie is a Gulf Fleet sailor who was the first female boat at our 2018 Worlds. So she's
Wow,
quite at the front of the queue.
I'd have two suggestions. So if you can go out with somebody who's umpiring, it can be team racing, fleet racing, or match racing. You've got rules incidents happening from the minute, well, you've got the pre-start side and then you've got the race itself. And I always used to think it's like having an Eric Twinane pop-up book, and all these rules are just happening in front of you. Whereas sometimes you can go through a whole race and never have an interaction necessarily with another boat. So it's quite hard to pick up on things.
Mm-hmm.
But when you've got umpires on the water, boats are able to push the rules as far as possible. As you know, if you have a port starboard incident that has to go to the protest room, the port boat's got a lot to prove in terms of being able to win it against the starboard boat. But when you've actually got a judge boat right there watching it, it can be pushed much closer and much harder, if you like, and you can talk about what's happening, and it's much easier to understand the rules.
Okay.
You also understand it from the judge perspective, because as Ella said earlier, actually swapping from being a sailor to getting onto a judge boat is quite interesting to see it from their perspective. So when we match race, we quite often will take, as a team get knocked out of the event, we'll take them onto the umpire boats and actually talk through, as we're umpiring, we'll talk through what we're saying and why we're saying it, and actually get them involved in the umpiring as well. So they learn an awful lot from that. And I think the only other suggestion would be to enroll on a judge course.
Yeah.
That would give you the basics. Normally on a judge course, they start out by saying, we aren't here to teach you the rules. We're here to teach you the procedural side. But I guarantee the rules will come in the conversation. And by the evening time, everybody will be using the knives and forks as boats and doing rule scenarios. So it's a really good practical thing to do.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Sally.
There's also another thing as well, for if you're at home a bit more, is there's actually an ebook on the racing rules, and it's people talking through each rule with like a scenario going on. So people talk over the scenario. So that is available online.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's also a game you can play online.
Oh,
so you can
cheap.
visually see it. Yeah, there's games that you can get, and they're not like kids games. They're literally port starboard, and there are scenarios, and it's a yes or no, right or wrong answer book, and it's great. It's fantastic, actually. If you're got a few hours to kill, you just keep going at it. They've literally all the scenarios that you can come across, and you can visually see it. The more you can visually see, the better. And then obviously the best is probably doing it, getting out in the water and actually.
It's just and it's just like, you know, if you're club racing only with, you know, on a good day 8 or 9 boats, you're not really. It's very hard to replicate that big fleet, you know, carnage. Let's just call it.
Basically,
yeah. No, that's very useful. Thank you to you all.
Amanda's got a question, Vanessa.
Hi, Amanda. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask, please? Not sure she's still there. She said thank you. You're muted again, Jill. Amanda, are you still with us? Or I think she may have just said thank you to everybody.
Yes, I think so.
Is there anybody else with any questions?
And what were the names of like these games that you can play for the rules? I'm really something
literally
I want to know about as
well. It's actually an American guy. It's an American game. I'm trying to think of the name of the website, but I think if you Google like racing rules, it's like a game or visuals, it should come up on Google. And it's quite a dated website, but it's very, 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 very good. Maybe I can get the link and possibly we can send it out afterwards or something like that.
Yeah, that would be brilliant. Carrie Ann.
Something fun that everyone can have. Yeah, it's great.
I'm thinking that we could definitely do another Zoom meeting, just, you know, a Zoom talk just on rules and just play this with everybody going, you know, thumbs up, thumbs down.
Actually, that would be really good, and for any of you who are judges or umpires to talk through the decision, sort of that, or what you're seeing in front of your eyes. That would be great.
We could get the trainee umpires to come along and give us yes. I've got a question for Sally. At what level would you actually want to, or what level is it best to start having judges and juries on the water to watch sailing? Because I think we're right in saying, Jill, we only normally have them at a Worlds and not at a Nationals.
Yeah, we do.
Occasionally we have incidences. You know, would the sailors behave better if we had a jury on the water, is my question to Sally.
Yes.
I think generally they do. But I think also, particularly if you want to encourage younger sailors, that actually them being exposed to protest hearings and just having rules people around is a really good thing. Because especially with, I mean, I was Secretary General of the International Optimist class for 8 years, and I know that my work as an official was hugely beneficial within that role, but it also enabled me to see that there were some sailors who had had a very positive experience with judges and umpires and actually felt that they were very approachable people, whereas there were others who'd had a very bad experience and would try and avoid us as much as possible, even when it would have been beneficial for them to actually come and talk to us. And I think what Carrie Ann said earlier is incredibly relevant, trying to make it a positive thing so that people feel we are approachable, because all of us here want to be able to help and encourage and make it a really pleasant experience when people go out on the water. So we aren't there to spoil anybody's day. We want to be as helpful and as accommodating as we can be. So I think if you only suddenly come across officials at an international event, it may well be the most important event you've ever done in your life, and now you're in a protest room, you've never had any experience, you don't know how the procedural side works. And I think that's really daunting. And you've also not got a relationship with the official side. So how you approach it, I think, is really, really hard. So for me, I think it's important that officials are around at all levels, be it club, national events or international.
Thank you very much, Sally. I think that's very good. Fortunately, I was not at the event where my son was protesting. Well, no, my son lost the event because his sister and girlfriend protested the committee and won. So I was glad I wasn't on the journey home for that. So it is, as you say, it is good to have a positive relationship with the protest committee and being able to validate by the rules. I think we've all been in sailing clubs where the salt and pepper or the wine glass and the beer mug become the boats and the mark, and it is learning the rules that way and talking them through. And I don't understand most of the rules, so I just take a step back at that point, but I will learn them. Are there any other questions from anybody? Okay. Can I thank Olive, Sally, Carrie Ann and Ella for their time. Olive had Brazil waiting for her, so she has left the group as she needed to go and do some measuring. And we are very, very grateful to you all for giving your time and your knowledge. And I'm sure we'll see quite a few of you at Skerries in 2022. I'm hoping we can get Ella into a boat to come and sail with us. She has a very good female helm. So we will say thank you very much, and we hope to get this up on the website in a couple of days. So thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. That was really good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thank you, Sally.